Hey, geometry students, what's going on? It's Mr. Elizondo. I'm subbing in for Mr. Siegel. We're looking at ratios and proportions. What's a ratio? Well, the definition says a ratio says how much of one thing there is compared to another thing. But let's look at an example. It says at Hume 2, for every 2 cool students in a class, there are 5 whack ones. Well, how are we going to write that as an actual ratio? A ratio is just a comparison, right? Come over here and I write, well, for every 2 cool students, there are 5 whack ones. All right. Or just like in my house, for every 2 cats I have, there's 1 dog. Or in a classroom of 20 kids, for every 10 girls, there's 10 boys. That's really what a ratio is. It's just a comparison. Now, if you scroll down a little bit, we look at a proportion right here. And a proportion basically has 2 ratios. So the key here is that we're looking at 2 ratios that are equal to one another. So now let's look at this new example. It says if there are 6 cool students in Mr. Siegel's class, how many whack students are there? So now let's go back up here. Now the original that we had, the original proportion was, gotta come down here, sorry about that, was 2 cool to 5 whack. All right. Now over here, this says if there are 6 cool students. So now we want to put it in the exact same spot in our new proportion. So if cool went on top in this one, cool's got to go on top on this one. So we got to write 6 cool here. Now we go back to the question. It says, well, how many whack students? So the whack students are what we're looking for. And now you all know from your many math classes that if we don't know something, we can just call it X. And there's our 2 proportions. And that's how proportions work. It's actually pretty simple. But let's look at an example to see how it's going to look in like math terms. So to look at how to solve proportions, the key is that you must cross multiply. All right, that's going to be your ticket to fame here. All right, so whenever you see proportions, you think cross multiply. So let's look at our 2 proportions here. It says 2/5 equals x over 10. So we're going to cross multiply. You think of that equal sign, we have to go across it. So it's going to be 2 times 10 and 5 times x. So let's see how it's actually going to be written. So over here, the 2 times 10 equals 20. That's going to go right here. And then for the 5 times x, we're just going to write 5x here. And then you all know, how do we get that x by itself? Well, we divide by 5 on both sides, divide by 5 on both sides, and you get x equals 4. Now, if you wanted to check that answer, you could easily put both of those in your calculator. So you could put 2/5 in your calculator and 4/10 in your calculator, and they'll both come out to give you the same decimal, which means you did it right. But you know it's math, so it can always get a little trickier, but we'll be fine. Let's look at this proportion. It says solve for x. We have 3x over 2 equals 18 over 4. Same thing, we're going to cross multiply, right? So we go here with 3x times 4, and we go here with 18 times 2. And so here, what's 3x times 4? Well, that's 12x. And then what is 18 times 2? That is 36. And see, even though this one looked a little more complicated, it really wasn't. Because now we know we just go back over here to get x by itself. We divide both sides by 12. And we get x equals 3. And once again, you could plug it in to check if you wanted to. You get 3 times 3 is 9 over 2, ends up being the same decimal. And here we go, solve for x. And see, it gets a little more complicated, but not too bad. It's the same idea. You see the proportions and you cross multiply. So we have 12 times x plus 2. Now, we're going to write it just like this, all right, before we try to do anything too complicated. Remember, when you do the 1 term times 2 here, you want to write that second one in parentheses. And then we know here we have 6 times a 5x. So we'll write that, which we know 6 times 5x is 30x. Okay. So now what do we do with this right here, that 12x plus 2? Oh, I knew you knew it. It's distribute, right? This one goes over there, this one goes over there. So what's 12 times x? It's 12x. And then we want to do plus. What's 12 times 2? Well, that's 24. And this equals, and we still have our 30x. And now you remember we have to combine like terms. That's key. Make sure you know which ones go with which. So the x's have to go together. So we subtract 12x from both sides. And we get 24 equals 18x. And then we divide both sides by 18. And our x equals 24 over 18, which you could simplify, but we'll leave it right there. X equals 24 over 18. And once again, you could plug them in and check it and all that. Oh, screen jumped on us. But here, it says MP over ST equals MN over SV. What is the length of SV? And they've got shapes, and don't stress it. We'll just set it up piece by piece. So first, it says that MP, which is right here, over ST, all right, is equal to, and now let's mark this side, MN over SV. Now they want us to find SV. Now you know anything that we don't know, we can just label it as an X, right? So now let's just set up our proportions. So we know MP goes on top. What's MP? It's 9. 9 here. And then what is ST? Well, ST is 6. All right, easy enough. Now what was MN? Well, MN's over here. That's 12. And what is SV? SV is X. And so once you set it up, it's actually pretty easy, because now we're just going to cross multiply, and we'll get, what's 9 times X? That's 9X. 9X equals, what's 12 times 6? That's 72. And then we divide both sides by 9, and we get a nice and even X equals 8. So even if they throw shapes at you, you don't have to stress. As long as you know which sides are equal to one another, as I did a wonderful circling job, you're going to be doing just fine. So hey, that was 7.1 ratios and proportions. Make sure you do your independent practice. Keep it real.